They come in radiating a kind of theatrical confidence, chest puffed, voices louder than necessary, every gesture exaggerated like they're performing for an audience. Their swagger precedes them. The air bends slightly with their arrival, not because they're powerful, but because they've convinced themselves they are. These are the types who measure dominance by how often they interrupt, who gauge intelligence by how long they can talk without being questioned. They don't pause for reflection, they pause for applause. Every silence they encounter is misinterpreted as submission. Every nod they receive is assumed to be admiration. But what they can't see, what their oversized self-image refuses to process, is the quiet calculation happening around them. They think they're being admired. In reality, they're being studied. Underneath their boldness is a delicate construct held together by illusions they desperately need you to believe. But those illusions, however glossy, are brittle. Tap the right corner, apply the slightest pressure to the right insecurity, and the entire facade starts to splinter. Not with noise, not with drama, with stillness, with strategy. The strongest manipulations are the ones that feel like accidents. That's what separates the ordinary from the masters. It's not about confrontation. It's about orchestration. It's not about overpowering. It's about tilting the balance so subtly that by the time they fall, they believe they tripped over their own greatness. You don't bring down an inflated self-image by charging at it. The moment you directly challenge it, they brace themselves, they activate every defense mechanism, they shift into combat mode. But when you applaud it, when you mirror their pride back at them, with just a touch of exaggeration, they disarm themselves. Compliments can be weapons if sharpened correctly. Tell them how brilliant they are, how their insight borders on divine. Go just a little too far. Say things that sound admiring on the surface but carry a faint aftertaste of irony. Those listening will notice the overkill. The target high on praise won't, not at first. But eventually the imbalance becomes evident even to them, and they begin to wonder, was that flattery or mockery? Once that seed is planted, the unraveling begins. You don't need to water it. Their own insecurity will do the job for you. From that point, all you have to do is remain composed. Ask questions that nudge rather than jab. Express curiosity that veils critique. Say things like, "That's a bold perspective. Where did it originate?" Or, "That's an unconventional approach. Do you find it still works in today's climate?" You're not disagreeing. You're simply inviting them to validate themselves, and in doing so, you watch as their confidence transforms into defensiveness. Because now, instead of basking in praise, they're scrambling for justification. Their monologue has become a self-interrogation, and that transition isn't just visible, it's contagious. Others around them sense the shift, and the room starts turning. One of the most brutal tools in this dance is silence. Used with precision, silence is not absence, it's pressure. When they deliver what they think is a triumphant point, respond with nothing. No affirmation, no contradiction, just a calm, unreadable face. Let the silence sit there like a mirror. Let it force them to repeat themselves, to add, to over-explain. Because what they expect is validation, and when it doesn't arrive, their confidence doesn't just wobble. It wavers, and then it cracks. Silence in the right moment is the most deafening rejection. You don't need to steal the spotlight. Just reposition it. Share a story that dwarfs theirs without ever stating that was the intent. Let your achievements surface like casual anecdotes. You're not boasting. You're simply existing in a narrative where their accomplishments seem smaller by comparison. Not because you said so, but because the contrast is unavoidable. That's how you wound an ego without even touching it. When you act like their peak moment is your starting point, They feel it in their spine. And they can't call it out, because on the surface, everything you said was neutral, even kind. Another doorway into their hidden insecurities is to make them the topic, gently. Ask questions that hover near the things they hide. If they constantly brag about their reputation, ask if they ever worry people are just afraid to be honest with them. If they always mention wealth, inquire if they ever imagine losing it all. Not as an attack, as a soft curiosity, but the effect is immediate. The air shifts, because these are not questions they're used to hearing. And when they do, it's not just what they answer. It's how long they pause before doing so. In that pause is your confirmation. You found the crack. But perhaps the most poetic undoing is letting them build their tower, brick by brick, story by story, and then stepping back. Don't pull it down. Just wait. Sooner or later, they'll overextend. They'll try to dominate someone they shouldn't. They'll make a comment that lands wrong. They'll speak when silence would have been safer. And when that moment comes, say nothing. Don't defend. Don't gloat. Let your restraint be the loudest voice in the room. Because when chaos breaks loose, the one who remains composed becomes the one remembered. Not the one who barked the loudest, but the one who watched it all collapse and never flinched. Control is most powerful when it isn't performed. You don't need to humiliate, just withhold. Don't laugh at their joke. Don't respond to their flex. Replace validation with polite indifference. Say, interesting, and nothing more, or glance at someone else and change the subject. That quiet redirection hits harder than an insult, because now they're chasing something they once took for granted, your attention, and the more they chase, the less dignity they retain, all without you lifting a single verbal weapon. A single raised eyebrow, a faint chuckle at the wrong time, can disassemble someone who lives off impression. If they speak expecting laughter or awe, and you respond with restrained amusement or none at all, you communicate something deeper than criticism, irrelevance. They want awe, they get indifference. And that contrast is what twists the ego, makes it unstable, especially when everyone else begins to see it too. When their magic stops working on you, others start wondering if it ever really worked at all. Let them talk, encourage them, ask follow-ups, applaud their stories. But watch for the moment they trip over their own narrative, that inconsistency, that embellishment too far, that exaggeration that reveals more than intended. And when it happens, don't say a word. Just lean back slightly, let others connect the dots. You're not exposing them. You're offering them the rope, and they're tying the knot themselves. Now comes the coldest blade, the one carved from absence. After giving them an audience, withdraw it. Cut off the energy supply. They've tasted your attention. Now let them starve for it. Don't return messages. Don't engage when they circle back. Let them spiral, trying to locate the moment they lost your gaze. That confusion becomes obsession. They rehearse conversations in their mind. They replay every smile, every nod, wondering if it was real. You gave them a mirror and then you took it away. And now they're lost in their own reflection. And if they confront you, stay calm. Say you've moved on. Say you're focused elsewhere. Not out of anger, out of disinterest. That's what burns. Not that you hated them, that you don't think of them at all. Indifference isn't neutrality, it's power. It signals that they no longer occupy space in the room that matters. At this point, you've done what most can't. You've reshaped perception without conflict. You've rewritten the script without touching the page, and the most brutal part, they will remember everything you didn't say more than anything you could have said, because their ego isn't just bruised, it's altered. They walk into future rooms differently now, a little less loud, a little more uncertain, because you didn't defeat them with force. You defeated them by never needing to raise your voice. Let them become dependent on the stage, then pull the curtains, not with vengeance, but with grace. Their collapse will be internal. Their voice will falter in places it once soared. Their stories will lose conviction. And when others notice, you'll be somewhere else, still silent, still watching, not out of cruelty, but because power doesn't chase applause. It moves on. There's a point where the collapse no longer needs your help. The ego, once confident, begins to unravel under its own momentum. And the beauty of it all is that you remain still. You don't hurry the process. You don't explain your strategy. You simply let the weight of their delusion pull them down. And when they hit the ground, it won't be the fall that breaks them. It'll be the silence that followed it. Because silence, when used with skill, becomes the most merciless accomplice. It doesn't confront. It surrounds. It amplifies every insecurity until they echo in their own mind like thunder. This is when you move from undermining to ownership, not of them as a person, but of the space they thought they ruled. The power they believed was theirs begins to orbit around you, not because you took it, but because they surrendered it, trying to impress you, and you never asked them to. That's what makes it so devastating. They built a pedestal and stood proudly atop it, only to find themselves looking up at someone who never tried to climb at all. The next level of control comes from crafting perception through contradiction. Say nothing about your superiority. Let others draw their own conclusions. When the ego-fueled individual makes a comment meant to impress, leave it unaddressed. Let it dangle in the air, unanswered. But when they say something forgettable, something minor, that's when you nod. That's when you give a small, approving glance. You've just rearranged the hierarchy in their mind. What they thought made them valuable, ignored. What they dismissed about themselves, highlighted. It's a subtle rewiring that causes deep confusion, because now they don't trust their own instincts about how they're perceived. Once you've unseated them internally, begin displaying emotional neutrality externally. If they try to provoke, mock, or reclaim space, do not react. Your composure becomes your weapon. Look at them as you would a breeze, harmless, brief, and most of all, unworthy of reaction. This is not an act of arrogance. It is the ultimate declaration of independence. You're not trapped in their emotional universe. You floated outside of it entirely. And that is what truly fractures someone who defines their identity by how others respond. In environments where attention is currency, refuse to spend yours on them. Focus on the quiet person in the room. Acknowledge a different presence. Give energy to someone overlooked. The egotist, who once consumed all eyes, will feel the spotlight dim and panic, not outwardly, inwardly. Their mind begins to churn with questions. Why not me? What changed? You didn't insult them. You just chose differently. And that, to an ego that feeds on recognition, feels like suffocation. Occasionally deliver one comment wrapped in warmth, but edged like a blade. Something that feels like kindness, but lands like diagnosis. Say, you try really hard to seem relaxed. It's kind of admirable. Or you've built such a strong image. It must be exhausting to maintain. Delivered gently, with no malice, these phrases strike deeper than insults ever could, because they sound like observations, not attacks, and that makes them harder to deny. The ego, confused by the tone, fumbles between reacting with pride or defensiveness, and in that hesitation they lose ground. One of the most cutting methods is to laugh once, not cruelly, not mockingly, just a short, genuine chuckle at a moment they expected admiration. Perhaps they said something meant to impress, something theatrical. And you smile not at the joke, but at the attempt. You say nothing. You offer no follow-up. That moment becomes an echo. It stains their memory, and they wonder, what did you see? What made you laugh? Was it them? Was it their mask? That one laugh creates a fracture no argument ever could. As the collapse continues, offer no reassurance. Let them wonder if they're still captivating. Let them question if you ever truly believed in their charm, their intellect, their power. And every time they try to reclaim that belief, remain neutral. Offer them no emotion, no judgment, no rescue, because what you're doing is exposing the dependency they never admitted they had, the addiction to being perceived a certain way. You've removed the mirror, and now they can't see themselves clearly anymore. Now introduce confusion, but softly. Ask about their transformation. Say, "You seem quieter these days. Are you okay? Or you've changed." It's kind of refreshing. Say it with concern, say it with warmth, but let it land, because now their own change is being pointed out, not by an enemy, by someone who isn't even trying to harm them. That contradiction sends their thoughts spiraling. They feel exposed, but there's no attacker to fight, only a shadow, only implication. This is when their own circle begins to notice. They start whispering. They begin to distance themselves. The same people who once echoed their laughter now watch them carefully, not because they see weakness, but because you've taught them to look for it. And when they spot it, they remember who stood calm in the storm, who never raised their voice, who never needed the room, but commanded it anyway. The final strike isn't spoken, it's performed. When their voice shakes where it once thundered, you look away. When they reach for you with a story, a joke, a desperate attempt to recapture attention, you respond with gentle disinterest. Not cruelty, not silence, just the kind of reply reserved for someone who no longer matters in your world. You nod, you smile, you say, "Oh, that's something," and then you shift your attention elsewhere. That pivot, tiny, effortless, is an earthquake. And when others comment on the change, when they say, "He's not like he used to be," or "She seems less confident now," you deny nothing, but you claim nothing either. You shrug, offer a soft, ambiguous smile and say, "People evolve." That sentence is not a lie. It's a sentence designed to end conversations, but its echo is far louder than any defense. You've become the reference point. You are now the measurement by which their decline is tracked, not because you forced it, but because you revealed what was already unstable. And the most haunting part? They will remember you not as the destroyer, but as the one who never once raised their voice. And yet, everything collapsed anyway. You didn't dismantle their ego. You allowed it to cannibalize itself in your presence. You held up a mirror and then vanished. And they'll be chasing their own image in that mirror long after you've left the room. That is power. That is legacy. That is the art of dominance without confrontation. The Machiavellian signature of psychological warfare. Where others use anger, you use stillness. Where others wield force, you wield silence. And where others demand attention, you command it by never needing it. This isn't manipulation. This is awareness, weaponized. It's the quiet recognition that some illusions are best broken not with a sledgehammer, but with a whisper. And once they crack, once the performance falters and the mask slips, you don't strike, you don't celebrate, you walk away. Because the ego that requires the world to notice is already its own prison. And you're not locked inside. You're the one holding the key, smiling as the door closes qui.